चलो जल्दी। What are the properties? Anyone can use it. What is the property of finance? Anyone? Analytics, delay or conversion and divergence, facilitation and distribution. Relation are two types, spatial and temporal. अब यूजर हो गया और various types of analytic modification. ठीक है, whether it is an inhibition form or in the facilitation form, pre-synaptic inhibition, post-synaptic inhibition, facilitation like that. Okay, so we will just discuss briefly the salient features. The somatodendritic tree acts like an integrator that summates all the EPSP and IPSP. What does that mean? That summates all the EPSP and IPSP. So क्या होगा that after summation, what will happen with the development of post-synaptic potential? Then, if it is above threshold, action potential will fire. Action potential जनरेट कहां पर होता है? कोई भी एक्सॉन है, the trigger point for generation of action potential is at which region of axon? So you know for the initial segment of the axon. It is the most sensitive region where there is preponderance of the sodium channels. That's why that is the reason where the action potential will get generated. Now, when the action potential will generate at that point, action potential should travel towards the end of that axon, or it will also spread towards the cell body or soma. Bi-direction. Action potential is bi-direction. That means action potential obviously it will travel to the end of the axon, but action potential also has propensity to travel towards the cell body or the end. ठीक है ना? इसको क्या बोलते हैं? सोमाडेंड्राइट स्पाइक. ठीक है ना? इसका कुछ फायदा होता होगा? एक्शन पोटेंशियल जो है, जो न्यूरॉन जो आपके एक्सोन टर्मिनल में जा रहा है वहां पे तो फायदा है. इट इज कॉल्ड द रिलीज ऑफ न्यूरोट्रांसमीटर. बट इफ इट स्प्रेड्स प्रॉक्सिमली टुवर्ड्स द सेल बॉडी ऑफ सोमा, इज देयर एनी एडवांटेज ऑफ दैट? Facilitation. Facilitation in which sense? तो मान लिया कि आपका जो सेल बॉडी है, सेल बॉडी को आप स्लेट समझिए. स्लेट पे आपने कुछ कैलकुलेशन किया. अब उसको कैलकुलेशंस कर दिया, उसके पास को क्या करना है? वाइप करना पड़ेगा ना. तो दैट द फ्रेश कैलकुलेशन कैन हैपन. तो व्हाट दिस यू कैन से सेल बॉडी और डेंड्राइटिक स्पाइक जो एक्शन पोटेंशियल जो आपका सेल बॉडी की तरफ जा रहा है, व्हाट इट विल डू? It will wipe out that thing so that again algebraic summation of the next impulse can happen. You can say it will be acting like a wiping of the slate, so that the fresh calculation may happen in the cell body for the next impulse. Okay. Now it takes about 0.5 millisecond to cross the 20 nanometer wide synaptic cleft. So synaptic cleft has some dimension around 20 to 40 nanometer wide. ठीक है, तो total time taken is around 0.5 millisecond. Now you can imagine 0.5 millisecond. जब हम लोगों ने पढ़ा आपका था फाइबर्स में जो स्पीड ऑफ कंडक्शन है few meters per second है. So that means this synaptic transmission is a much slower process than the nerve conduction. इसका क्या फायदा हो सकता है? कि हमको एक सिनेप्टिक डिले का टाइम पता है, इट इज अराउंड 0.5 मिली सेकेंड। तो फिजियोलॉजिस्ट इससे क्या इन्फ्रेंस निकालते हैं यूजुअली? वेरी गुड, नंबर ऑफ साइनेप्स, वेदर योर सर्किट इज मोनोसाइनेप्टिक और इट इज पॉलीसाइनेप्टिक, थ्रू दिस टाइम यू कैन फाइंड आउट। तो फॉर एग्जांपल स्ट्रेस रिफ्लेक्स है, स्ट्रेस रिफ्लेक्स इज मोनोसाइनेप्टिक स्ट्रेस रिफ्लेक्स। Impulse will go to the afferent neuron, to dorsal horn, it will relate to the anterior horn cell, and efferent nerve fiber will come and they will cause the contraction of the muscle. So through that time they came to the conclusion that the stress reflex is monocytic. Otherwise they can also find out time is more and it will be polycytic. Usually आपकी body में जो भी आपकी जो deep tendon jerks है, stress reflex, these are monosynaptic. The superficial reflection later on we will covering that your human lab, that will be your polysynaptic. Okay? Small molecules, neurotransmitters and neuropeptides, they can coexist in the same neuron. The neuron is said to be facilitated when the potential is nearer the threshold for firing than normal, but not yet to the firing level. ये क्लियर हुआ था आपको लास्ट टाइम कि मान लिया आपका इम्पल्स ट्रेवल कर रही है फ्रॉम प्री सिनेप्टिक न्यूरॉन टू पोस्ट सिनेप्टिक न्यूरॉन, व्हाट विल हैपन? पोस्ट सिनेप्टिक न्यूरॉन विल फायर, बट उसका जो नेबरिंग न्यूरॉन होगा उसका पोटेंशियल भी चेंज होगा टुवर्ड्स पॉजिटिविटी, ठीक है? सो दैट नाउ इट्स पोटेंशियल इज मोर नियरर टू द थ्रेशोल्ड लेवल, तो दैट इज सेड टू बी द फैसिलिटेटेड, और यू कैन से इन द सबलिमिनल जोन, ठीक है? तो दैट न्यूरॉन मे गेट फैसिलिटेटेड, ओके? It is easier to stimulate this neuron with subsequent input. Okay? तो इसका फायदा क्या होगा फैसिलिटेशन का, सबलिमिनल जोन का, कि if next time you give only a weak stimulus, then that neuron is able to fire. Okay? Now other things were difference between the electrotonic conduction and action potential. You are well aware of it. Subthreshold potential change is proportional to the stimulus strength. It is graded potential, while action potential is independent of stimulus. All or none la follow कर रहा है. That threshold potential change, it is not propagated but decremental with distance, and it is action potential is propagated unchanged in magnitude. I think you have been told about some physics of your impulse conduction. Okay, what is time constant, what is space constant, but through that we can find out. Then this electrotonic conduction, it shows summation, while action potential summation is not possible. Clear? But different neurons, they can respond differently based on their different excitatory state and maximum frequency of discharge. That's why various kind of modulations are possible in the central nervous system. Hypoxia, pH changes and drugs, they may affect synaptic transmission. How they may affect? फॉर एग्जाम्पल पीएच चेंज, ये आपका एसिडोसिस हो गया या अल्कोलोसिस हो गया, हाउ इट कैन अफेक्ट द सिनेप्टिक ट्रांसमिशन? एसिडोसिस में क्या होगा, बढ़ेगा या कम होगा? इट विल रिड्यूस द ट्रांसमिशन ऑफ साइनेप्स, जैसे डायबिटिक कॉमा है, एसिडोसिस है, उसमें आपका दैट ट्रांसमिशन विल गेट रिड्यूस, एक्साइटेबिलिटी इज रिड्यूस्ड, व्हाइल इन केस ऑफ अल्कोलोसिस, एल्कोलोसिस का ज्यादातर कब करते हैं? For example, when a subject overventilates, okay, so hyperventilation will lead to alkalosis, and that alkalosis sometimes it may precipitate seizures. The subjects who are having the epileptic tendency, if these subjects somehow they hyperventilate, so they are more prone to develop the seizures. Okay, so that's because of the change of the synaptic transmission, because of the any kind of pH change. Now, obviously, the drugs they may also affect it. Okay. Now we come to the next topic, the somatic sensations. What is sensation? Sensation is basically, you can say that conscious awareness of the feeling that is evoked by the stimulation of certain type of receptors. Whenever the receptors will get stimulated, what will happen? So that sensory information will travel to the brain. And when your brain is consciously perceiving that feeling, that will be coming to the category of sensation. Initially, it will be purely only sensory information. And when it goes to the brain, at the conscious level, and the subject is aware of it, that will become sensation. Okay. And this is your general somatosensory axis. What is happening here? There is certain kind of receptors, for example, receptors in the skin and deep in the tissue, receptors in the muscle, like muscle spindle, receptors in your joints, proprioceptors. Okay? These are the receptors in the muscles, and these are the mechanoreceptors in the skin. Whenever these are stimulated by certain kind of stimuli. What is stimuli? Anything which changes the environment in the vicinity of that receptor. Okay? Either that environment is external or it is internal. That stimuli may be of any kind. Okay? Later on we will see it may be mechanical, it may be chemical, it may be electromagnetic, like that. Okay? The information will be carried through spinal cord, medulla. Ultimately they will relate to the thalamus, and before that there will be some exchange of information with the cerebellum. And cerebellum mein there will be pre-processing of that information, and then finally the information will be going to the somatosensory areas. Okay? Posterior to the central sulcus. Okay? And this is your general somatosensory axis. We will go in detail of that. What are the somatic sensations? These are the sensations which arise from the somatic structures of the body, that is skin and the deep tissue. The types may be mechanoreceptive sensations that include the most commonly the tactile and the proprioceptive. So tactiles, touch, pressure and vibration. Proprioceptive, sense of position and movement, which is sensations are coming from the, you can say from muscle spindle or from around joints. Pain sensations are known as the nociceptive sensation, and pain receptors, these are known as nociceptors. So when any kind of noxious stimuli or innocuous stimuli, it stimulates that receptor nociceptive, then nociceptive kind of sensations will get elicited. Then there may be thermal sensation, cold and warm. Apart from this, there may be, you can say, chemical sensations, electromagnetic sensations. For example, rod and cones, they are stimulated by light. Olfactory receptors, they are stimulated by some chemical. Okay? Or you may categorize them into either there is conscious sensation or it is unconscious sensation, like that. Now this is your types of receptors present in the skin. For example, fingertip में आपके कौन-कौन से receptors होते हैं? Receptors in the epidermis and the dermis. तो free nerve endings are most crude type of receptors. ठीक है? We will go in detail into that. Mischner capsules, Merkel cells, Ruffini capsules, and Pacinian capsules are deep in the skin. Now, what are the features of the sensory receptors? सबसे पहली चीज, they act as transducers. Transducers means they will convert the one form of energy into the another form. So basically your receptors, they may get stimulated by any kind of energy, either the mechanical energy, or it may be thermal energy, it may be chemical energy, and ultimately that energy form will be converted into electrical impulse. So your all sensory receptors, they are acting like a transducers. And the structure of that receptor, that is specialized in the sense that will cause the amplification of that stimuli, so that the electrical impulses are relaying to the brain. Now they react to a particular form of stimuli that is known as adequate stimulus. That stimuli for which the receptor is specific, that stimuli is known as adequate stimulus. So here adequate does not mean only supra-threshold. Here adequate also means a specific type of stimuli. Your receptors, they are specific for that specific kind of stimuli. Okay? Later on we will see that is known as adequate stimulus. The receptors may be either the rapidly adapting or slowly adapting. Okay? What does that mean? Later on we will see. जैसे मान लिया कि you are putting on a shirt, your touch receptors get activated. But if your touch receptors are continuously getting activated, what will happen? That will bother you. So what is happening there? So nature has designed them so that these touch receptors are rapidly adapting. Initially they will get stimulated, but later on there is no continuous stimulation. Okay? So some receptors we need in our body to be rapidly adapted, and for some receptors we need that continuous information should go to the brain. Brain should get apprised continuously about that kind of stimulus. Then sensory receptors, they are developing the receptor potential. The receptor potential ultimately will generate the action potential. That's why this receptor potential is also known as generator potential. Okay? And these receptors are of various complexity. Now we will look into that. Now this is your stimulation of receptors by various kind of stimuli. What is happening here? Now this is your Pacinian capsule. They are the connective tissue layer around that Pacinian capsule, and in the center there is a nerve fiber. The tip of nerve fiber is unmyelinated, okay, and later on it becomes myelinated. So myelination starts inside the capsule only, okay. So it is showing this. Whenever this receptor is stimulated, what happens? So that receptor is basically a stress-sensitive channel. So whenever there is a mechanical deformation of this receptor, what will happen? Membrane will get stressed and ion channel will open. It will cause the entry of the sodium ion. Now, this will lead to the development of receptor potential. And the receptor potential, that amplitude of the receptor potential, that will depend on the strength of the stimulus. Whenever it is a weak stimulus, receptor potential is less. As you increase the receptor potential, with increasing strength of stimulus, the amplitude of receptor potential will also increase. And if it is a strong stimulus, receptor potential reaches above threshold, then action potential or the spike potential will fire. Okay? Now, the various kind of stimuli, they can lead to the generation of this receptor potential. Now, what are the complexity range of receptors? Now, you just see here, this is simple neural receptor. So this is the most primitive, you can say, crude type of receptor, free nerve endings. There is no specialized receptors. The ending of axon itself, they are acting like a receptor. So these are known as free nerve endings. So usually your nociceptors or the pain receptors, these are free nerve ending. Okay? Now important thing here, this is your cell body. आप लोग को एनाटॉमी में पढ़ा होगा, दिस इज डॉर्सल रूट गैंग्लिया. तो डॉर्सल रूट गैंग्लिया की जो प्रोसेस है, एक प्रोसेस उसका पेरिफेरी में जा रहा है और एक प्रोसेस इसका सेंटर में जा रहा है. दिस इज नोन एज स्यूडो यूनिपोलर न्यूरॉन. तो एक ही प्रोसेस जो है दो पार्ट में डिवाइड हो गया. आइडियली इट शुड बी टर्म्ड एज डेंड्राइट, बट इन योर बुक इट इज टर्म्ड एज एक्सॉन. तो वी कैन फॉर ऑल प्रैक्टिकल पर्पज वी कैन टेक इट एज peripheral axon, but this is your afferent part of this neuron. Okay? Now this afferent part of neuron, this is acting like a receptor. So this is simple neural receptors. Free nerve endings are only they are acting like a receptor. Various kind of stimuli, they can cause the stimulation of these nerve endings. Okay? In another case, the receptor is a specialized structure. For example, in the Pacinian capsule, so around this nerve fiber, there is a layers of connective tissue. ठीक है? So this is your example of Pacinian capsule or the pressure sensitive receptor. The receptor is a specialized structure. Okay? So that is another type of receptor. And in your some cases, your cell body or soma can also act like a receptor. For example, in your olfactory system, then your olfactory system, this cell body, they are acting like a receptor. In most of the cases, the axon is a receptor. Okay? Or receptor may not be neither it is axon nor it is cell body. It is another structure that is acting like a receptor. So in the first case, receptor is a part of neuron. Action potential will be triggered if the receptor potential rises above the threshold. In second case, for example, in the spatial senses, for example, in the auditory system, so these are the hair cells. These hair cells, these are acting like a receptor. So these specialized receptor cell, they will release some substance or chemical neurotransmitter, and amount of that neurotransmitter release, that is directly proportional to the strength of stimulus. More the strength of stimulus, more the neurotransmitter will get released, and it will cause the stimulation of this neuron. Clear? The receptor either may be the neuron itself, or it may be the specialized structure, it may be the cell body, or it may be the different structure, like the hair cells in the auditory system, or for example in the visual system, your rod and cones. Rod and cones are neither axon or cell body. You can say they are type of modified epithelial cell. So they are acting like a receptor. So that is known as complexity range of receptors. The receptor may be of many types. So we are talking about only the, you can say basically the receptors in the sensory system. Otherwise, receptors का classification आप लोगों ने पढ़ा हुआ है in the endocrine system, depending on the various kind of transduction mechanism. Okay, whether it is G protein coupled receptor, it is intrinsic ion channel, it is enzymatic receptor, like that. So same thing is depicted here. The receptor is the modified ending of afferent neuron, and stimulus is there. It will cause the opening of voltage gated channels. Okay? And impulse will get transmitted. In the special senses, the receptor is a separate cell. The stimulus will lead to the release of neurotransmitter, and it will lead to the opening of chemical messenger gated channel. So here the channels are usually the voltage gated, and here the channels are chemical messenger gated channels. Okay? Now with some facts about various kind of receptors. Pacinian capsule. These are present on the hairy and the glabrous skin. But the hairy and non-hairy, both kind of skins, these receptors are present. This is the most sensitive mechanoreceptor. These are rapidly adapting receptors. Rapidly adapting means that whenever you cause the mechanical deformation of the outer layer of this corpuscle, what will happen? Initially, the impulse will be transmitted along the nerve fiber. But later on, what will happen? If there is a continuous stimulation of that Pacinian capsule, what will happen? That fluid in that Pacinian capsule, it will get redistributed. You can say that mechanical, जो आपका mechanical deformation हुआ initial part में, now it ceased to exist now. Now it will get redistributed. So no longer there is mechanical deformation of the tip of the nerve fiber. Although deformation is happening at the outer part of Pacinian capsule, but it is no longer causing the development of the receptor potential. So you can say it is adapted rapidly. Okay? तो इसका मतलब क्या है कि that adaptation property of that Pacinian capsule, it is because of presence of that concentric layer of connective tissue. So somehow if you remove that concentric layer, so that rapidly adapting receptor, that can become the slowly adapting receptor. So that presence of that specialized structure around that tip of nerve fiber, that is giving it the property of rapid adaptation. Okay? Now these Pacinian capsules, they are concerned with the perception of pressure. The pressure you can say is a type of sustained touch sensation, and it is also perceiving the high frequency vibrations. ठीक है? तो जो आपकी राइटिंग है, राइटिंग में आपका कौन सा रिसेप्टर स्टिमुलेट हो रहा है? Pacinian capsule, sustained touch. Okay? When you are holding the pen. They are found in large numbers in the skin, subcutaneous tissue, mesentery, neighborhood of tendon and joints. Okay? You can see here the structure of this Pacinian capsule. There is a capsule of connective tissue and various lamella which are separated by a gel fluid, and inside it there is a unmyelinated nerve fiber tip, and later on it becomes myelinated. What is happening here? As soon as mechanical deformation happens, the deformed area happens, so what will happen? It will increase the positivity inside the neuron. There is development of receptor potential, and if it is above threshold, then action potential will get generated. And action potential will generate at the first node of Ranviera here. And first node of Ranviera, that is usually present inside the capsule only. So mechanical deformation forces here, that will cause the generation of receptor potential and further action potential. Okay. This is the transfer section of this president capsule. Next is the Meissner capsule. It is also encapsulated receptor. So now endings are encapsulated. These are the most numerous mechanoreceptors in our body. They are present usually in the non-hairy part of the skin, predominantly in the fingertips and the lips. It is also a rapidly adapting type of receptor. It is concerned with the low frequency vibration, skin motion and light pressure. Next are the Merkel's disc. These are present in the dermoepidermal junction of the glabrous skin. They are concerned with the perception of touch or tactile receptors. They also respond to the change in texture, low frequency vibrations, sustained pressure. Now, important thing is that they are having a good spatial resolution. What does that mean? Good spatial resolution. Out of all these mechanoreceptors, these are having the very good spatial resolution. A good spatial resolution किस सेंस में हेल्प करेगा? 3D स्ट्रक्चर नहीं, 2-point discrimination. The 2-point discrimination is determined by another factor we will discuss later on. कभी आप लोगों ने ब्लाइंड पीपल को देखा है? ब्लाइंड पीपल की जो टेक्टाइल एक्यूटी है, इट इज मोर. कभी आप लोगों ने वो ब्रेल वर्ड्स देखे हैं? द डॉट्स ऑफ द ब्रेल, दीज आर सेपरेटेड बाय सम डिस्टेंस एंड दैट डिस्टेंस इज यूजुअली कांस्टेंट. दे आर सेपरेटेड बाय 2.5 मिलीमीटर. तो दैट 2.5 मिलीमीटर डिस्टेंस, ठीक है, बिटवीन दीज डॉट्स, दिस इज बिकॉज ऑफ प्रेजेंस ऑफ these receptors in your fingertips, that is Merkel's disc. तो Merkel's discs are having the good spatial resolution. उनका receptive field जो होता है सबसे कम होता है. When they are having the very less amount of receptive field, what will happen? When a dot will be touched, so that single, you can say single Merkel's disc will get stimulated. So subject will have maximum tactile acuity. So because these Merkel's discs, they are having the good spatial resolution, so they are particularly helpful in the tactile acuity for the braille. ठीक है, that is helpful in the blind people. You can say Merkel's disc का जो impulse transmission है, that is a kind of high fidelity representation of the these dots. ठीक है, or these Merkel cells on the which are present on the skin. Next is the roughness end organs. They are also encapsulated endings of myelinated A delta or unmyelinated C group of fibers. They are also responsible for grip holding, or they are sensing the sustained pressure. They are usually found in the dermis and they are slowly adapting type of receptors. Okay. तो कौन से rapidly adapting थे? President capsules and Meissner capsules. ठीक है. By Merkel's disc and Ruffini end organs, these are slowly adapting. अगर मान लिया Merkel's disc आपके rapidly adapting होंगे तो क्या होगा? ब्लाइंड पीपल के लिए फिर हेल्पफुल ही नहीं होगा. तो इट इज नीडेड दैट सब्जेक्ट शुड कंटिन्यूअसली गेट स्टिमुलेशन. दैट्स व्हाई द रिसेप्टर्स आर स्लोली अडेप्टिंग. दे आर हैविंग द गुड स्पेशल रिजोल्यूशन, सो दे आर हेल्पफुल इन दोज पीपल. नाउ फ्री नर्व एंडिंग्स, they are responsible mainly for the reception of the pain, nociception. So all the nociceptors, these are free nerve endings. Apart from that, some other sensations like crude touch, pressure, tickle sensations, and cold and heat. In receptors of all these sensations are also a type of free nerve ending. Okay? Now free nerve endings, now if there is an associated tissue damage around the free nerve ending, now this free nerve ending, the excitability of these free nerve ending, it is subjected to the neighboring interference. whenever there is associated tissue damage, the excitability of these receptor it will increase. That means apart from the stimuli, if there is tissue damage also, then these receptors are maximally stimulated. Okay? For example, if there is any kind of injury along with the stimulus, then your pain perception will be more. So you can say pain stimulation may be due to any kind of stimuli, either severe mechanical deformation or extremes of temperature or application of any noxious chemical stimuli. So these various kind of stimuli, they can cause the stimulation of these free nerve ending, and they are responsible for perception of pain. तो पेन पे हम सेपरेट क्लास लेंगे. इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट आस्पेक्ट ऑफ योर सेंसरी सिस्टम. Now next thing is the receptive field. What is receptive field? Receptive field of a sensory unit is the spatial distribution from which a stimulus produces a response in that unit. So your area over that skin surface, so that is responsible for the transmission of impulse in a single afferent neuron, that is termed as receptive field. तो एक सेंसरी यूनिट का रिसेप्टिव फील्ड क्या होगा आपका, कि अगर आपका एक एफरेंट न्यूरॉन में इंपल्स ट्रांसमिट हो रही है तो उसके लिए कितना एरिया रेस्पॉन्सिबल है आपका स्किन के ऊपर, दैट इज द रिसेप्टिव फील्ड फॉर दैट एफरेंट न्यूरॉन. इट विल डिपेंड ऑन ब्रांचिंग ऑफ द एफरेंट फाइबर. It will also be dependent on the variation of the, you can say, regional variation of your skin. These receptive field will be different in the different areas of the skin. Later on we will see, for example, 2-point discrimination. 2-point discrimination is not similar at every area of the skin. Different areas in the skin, they are having different acuity of 2-point discrimination because they are having the different number of branching of the afferent nerve fiber, and they are having the different number of receptors. Now the receptive field, this is the reflection of somatic acuity. Okay? So you can say, for example, tactile acuity. So tactile acuity का reflection है receptive field. For example, in the Merkel's disc, the receptive field was small. Smaller the receptive field, more will be the tactile acuity. More will be the somatic acuity. It is important for 2-point discrimination. We will see. Now you just pay attention to this thing. Now these are 3 receptive field. Now this is the receptive field of A neuron. This is the receptive field for B neuron, and this is the receptive field for C neuron. Now what information are you getting? We have touched the skin by 2 stimuli. Simultaneous application of 2 closely situated stimuli. Whether they will be perceived as 2-point or single point. Now in first case, these 2 objects are just separated by this much distance. For example, 2 green dots. In second case, 2 objects, they are separated by this much distance, 2 red dots. In third case, 2 objects are separated by this much distance, 2 blue dots. In these 3 cases, this is the impulse traffic in these 3 neurons, A, B and C. So what information are you getting?
The strongest impulse is when the impulse is given at the center of receptor.
Very good. Okay. एक information उन्हें बताई clear. For example, this is the receptor field for A neuron. तो सबसे पहली चीज क्या है कि whenever the stimulus is given in the center of the receptive field, there is a maximum transmission in that afferent neuron. पहली चीज clear कि if the center of the receptive field is stimulated, there will be the transmission, and if the stimuli in the periphery of the receptive field, there will not be much transmission. एक चीज clear. Very good. Second thing,
इनहिबिशन हो रहा है सर, अगर पेरिफेरी पे है तो उसका रिलेटिव जो मतलब हो जाएगा, इंपल्स जाएगा, रिड्यूस इंपल्स.
ठीक है. एक तो आपका जो लेटरल इनहिबिशन है वो होता है कि whenever the impulse is traveling, it will cause the lateral inhibition. Lateral inhibition का फायदा क्या होता है कि it will cause the sharpening of the signal. कि whenever signal is transmitting in a afferent nerve fiber, तो neighboring afferent neurons जो होंगे उसमें आपका ट्रांसमिशन स्लो हो जाएगा, इट विल गेट रिड्यूस. एक तो वो हो रहा है. और इंपॉर्टेंट चीज क्या है, अगर आपसे पूछे हम 2 पॉइंट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन मैक्सिमम किस केस में है, ग्रीन वाले केस में, रेड वाले केस में, या ब्लू वाले केस में? मैक्सिमम 2 पॉइंट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन इज इन द ब्लू वाले केस में. व्हाई? ओके, क्लियर आपको? तो फर्स्ट केस में क्या हो रहा है, सिट डाउन. यू कैन सी हियर कि व्हेनेवर two dots are situated here, so you can see this dot is in the periphery of a receptive field, only a small amount of spike rate. B में क्या हो रहा है, both the dots are in the center of the receptive field of the B neuron. You can say maximum spike rate in the green here. Here, second dot here, this is in the periphery of the C neuron receptive field. Again, the spike rate is less. In second case, 2 red dots, this is near to the center. Okay? So the spike rate is more than the green one. Similarly, here, spike rate is more than the green one. Now, both these red dots, they are falling in the receptive field of the B neuron, the maximum transmission in the B neuron. In third case, this blue dot, it is in the center of the receptive field of A neuron, maximum transmission here. Here, this is in the center of the receptive field of C neuron, maximum transmission. Now, but in case of B, both these dots are falling in the edge of that receptive field. So there is least transmission here. So that's why maximum impulse traffic is occurring in the A neuron and C neuron. The brain will perceive only this case, blue dots, as the two objects. The two closely situated objects will be perceived as distinct one only in case of blue case. Okay? Whenever these two dots are in the center of the receptive field. Now this distance between dots, that will be dependent on the different regions. Okay? It will be least in the fingertips. ठीक है, अगर थोड़ा सा इधर आए हम और proximally, तो it will be more here in the at the wrist. Now this is one case. Now this is case for your afferent neuron. Now these are the receptive field for primary sensory neuron, जो आपका first sensory neuron जा रहा है, ठीक है ना. Now this thing is complicated further in our body by another phenomena, that is, later on we will see. ये तो क्लियर हो गया आपको कि अगर 2 पॉइंट्स आपके परसीव हैं तो दे आर परसीव्ड एज 2 पॉइंट ओनली बिकॉज these 2 dots or 2 objects are falling in the separate receptive field. Here these 2 dots or 2 stimuli, they are falling in the single receptive field, so it will be perceived as single point. ठीक है, but important thing, it is complication further occurs due to now distance I have already told you. This is, for example, maximum distances at the back. ठीक है, तो here you can say more than 60 millimeter. So this much distance is required to perceived as 2 point, while only 2 to 4 millimeter is required to perceived as 2 point in case of fingertips and lips. Okay, so these are having the maximum propensity to develop the to cause the perception of 2 point discrimination. The same thing here. If distance is less than 1 millimeter, only a single afferent neuron will get stimulated. There will be a 1 point discrimination. If distance is more than 1 millimeter, and if there is stimulation of 2 afferent neuron, there will be 2 point discrimination. Now this distance is more at the back because there is very few number of units here. You can see here the units, these sensory units are closely situated here, and these sensory units are at much distance with each other. So here, if distance is less than 30 millimeter, it will be perceived as 1 point discrimination, If it is more than 70 millimeter, it will be clearly demarcated as 2-point discrimination. Now this was case about the receptive field for primary sensory neuron. Another thing occurs that these primary sensory neuron, they converge to the secondary sensory neuron. Now you just pay your attention here. Now these are the receptive field for primary sensory neuron, afferent neuron that we were talking about. Now all these primary afferent neuron, they will further converge on the secondary neuron. So this whole will be the receptive field for this neuron, secondary neuron. The many primary sensory neurons, they converge onto a single secondary neuron, and that creates a very large receptive field. The two stimuli will be perceived as single point because both the stimuli are falling within the same receptive field. You can see here कि पहले केस में तो हमको लग रहा था it will be perceived as 2 point, but it also depends on your convergence in your neural circuitry. If all these neurons, they are converging into a single secondary neuron, then it will still be perceived as single point. Only one signal will go to the brain. While in another case, you can see here, when fewer neurons, they converge, secondary receptive fields are much smaller, and the two stimuli, they will activate the separate pathway, and they are perceived as distinct stimuli. So you can see here all these primary afferent neurons, they were converging onto single secondary neuron. And here you can see here, there are more number of secondary neuron. So receptive field for these secondary neuron is much smaller compared to the primary neuron. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? Here in this case, two signals are going to the brain. So for 2-point discrimination, convergence, if convergence is more, 2-point discrimination will be less. If convergence is less, 2-point discrimination will be more. So what are the factors on which 2-point discrimination depends on? It depends on, now this 2-point discrimination or tactile localization, it is more on the extremities than on the proximal part. We have seen that it is more on the fingertips and lips rather than on the back. It depends on, first thing, greater number of receptors. On your fingertips or on your distal part or extremities, the number of receptors are more. Second thing, greater number of afferent. The number of afferent fibers are more on the extremities compared to the proximal part. Okay, so that's why maximum propensity for that. Third thing, little convergence of afferents centrally. Okay, convergence जितना कम होगा उतना ज़्यादा 2-point discrimination होगा. Next thing is the another important entity is a wide area of cortical representation, good analysis and interpretation. Later on we will see in the sensory homunculus in different areas of your body they are allotted different amount of areas in the somatosensory cortex. So for your extremities like fingertips, there is a larger amount of area that is given in the cortical circuitry. Okay, so more the area, more the representation of that body part in the cortex, more will be the, you can say, tendency for 2-point discrimination. Clear? Now next topic is your sensory coding. What is sensory coding? कि जो भी आपकी सेंसेशन है उस सिंक्रोनाइज्ड सेंसेशन को बॉडी परसीव कर रही है कि इनिशियली इट वाज ओनली सेंसरी स्टिमुलाई दैट कन्वर्टेड टू sensory information and ultimately to the level of perception. So your sensory system, it codes for these four attributes of the stimulus. High stimulus में these are the 4 elementary attributes which are responsible for sensory coding. One is your modality, another is your location, third is your intensity, and fourth is your duration, adaptation. In the modality, important part is your adequate stimulus. Adequate stimulus क्या होता है? मैंने आपको बताया था कि every receptor it is having sensitivity to the specific type of stimuli. That stimuli is adequate for that receptor. That is specific for that receptor. That is known as adequate stimulus. For example, here, adequate stimulus is the physical energy to which a receptor is most tuned. For example, in case of eye, light will be the adequate stimulus, ear, sound will be the adequate stimulus, टच के लिए मैकेनिकल डिफॉर्मेशन, मसल स्पिंडल के लिए चेंजेस इन द मसल लेंथ, गोल्गी टेंडन ऑर्गन के लिए चेंजेस इन द मसल टेंशन. दीज आर द adequate stimulus for these kind of receptors. Although the receptors may get stimulated by other kind of stimuli that may not be adequate or specific. ठीक है, जैसे आप लोगों ने फिल्मों में देखा होगा, है ना, कि मैकेनिकल ब्लो ऑन द हेड साउंड सुनाई देती है. इसका मतलब क्या है? इफ यू गिव द हैवी मैकेनिकल ब्लो ऑन द हेड, इट कैन आल्सो लीड टू द स्टिमुलेशन ऑफ ऑडिटरी रिसेप्टर, बट थ्रेशोल्ड फॉर दैट स्टिमुलाई इट इज मच मोर देन द साउंड एनर्जी. ठीक है, वैसे जैसे आपका जो फोटो रिसेप्टर्स हैं, दे आर स्टिमुलेटेड बाय लाइट स्टिमुलाई. ठीक है, लेकिन अगर आप हैवी मैकेनिकल प्रेशर दे दें यहाँ पर, समटाइम्स आल्सो दीज फोटो रिसेप्टर्स गेट स्टिमुलेटेड, योर फ्लैशेज ऑफ लाइट परसेप्शन हैपन्स. ठीक है, बट दैट स्टिमुलाई इज नॉट एडिक्वेट और नॉट स्पेसिफिक फॉर that receptor. ठीक है, तो that means every receptor it is specific for a specific kind of stimuli. Okay. Now this is your cross sectional area of somatosensory cortex at the level of postcentral gyrus. एनाटॉमी पढ़ा होगा, ये क्या पता चलता है इससे? Anyone?
Sir, the size of the respective body part given shows us how much representation it has in the cortex for it. Like how much area is responsible for the sensation coming from that particular one.
Okay, very good. Sit down. तो पहली चीज जो टैक्टाइल लोकलाइजेशन है, कि जो रिसेप्टर से इंफॉर्मेशन जा रही है, टैक्टाइल लोकलाइजेशन बॉडी कैसे पता लगाती है? where that circuitry is finally relaying in your brain. ठीक है, तो your different areas in your brain, they are having the localization for different areas of the skin, and that allotment of area that is different for the different part of the body. Maximum is for, you can say, for lips, face, ठीक है, and least for your trunk and the lower part of the body. ठीक है, तो अगर हम देखें तो आपका दिस विल बी योर मीडियल पार्ट, दिस विल बी योर लेटरल पार्ट. तो अपर पार्ट ऑफ बॉडी इट इज रिप्रेजेंटेड इन द कॉर्टेक्स मोस्ट लेटरली, while lower part of the body it is represented most medially. This is known as sensory homunculus, or the little man in your brain. Now that little man in your brain, the body parts are not proportionate or as uniform as normally should happen, but it is bit, you can say it is a bit distorted man. The distortion is because different areas in your brain, they are given the different circuitry. For example, अगर आपका ये वाला लिप्स वाला रीजन है, ठीक है, तो दिस मच एरिया दैट इज अलॉटेड फॉर लिप्स रीजन. इसका मतलब क्या है कि दैट कॉर्टिकल सर्किटरी फॉर दिस रीजन इज मैक्सिमम. तो योर नंबर ऑफ रिसेप्टर्स, नंबर ऑफ एफरेंट न्यूरॉन, नंबर ऑफ योर यू कैन से सेकेंडरी एंड टर्शियरी न्यूरॉन इन योर ब्रेन, these are maximum in these regions. ठीक है, obviously because these regions, your distal extremities, these are required for the fine manipulation of the object. जो आपके टूल्स है, आपका सिविलाइजेशन में टूल्स का स्किल्ड यूज करने के लिए क्या होना चाहिए, जो डिस्टल पार्ट ऑफ योर बॉडी है, जो एक्सट्रीमिटीज हैं, दे शुड बी अलॉटेड द मैक्सिमम अमाउंट ऑफ एरिया. दैट्स वाई दैट योर ब्रेन कैन परफॉर्म मोर एफिशिएंटली. तो डिपेंडिंग ऑन द रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ योर बॉडी और द डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ वर्क, ठीक है, तो डिफरेंट एरियाज हैव बीन अलॉटेड इन योर सोमेटोसेंसरी कॉर्टेक्स. ओके, later on we will see the your next discussion in the next class. Okay, thank you. Any query or doubt you can ask. Attendance ले लो.
आगे Start telling your roll number. 22, 97, 101, 93, 108, 122, 50, 14, 32, 30, 1, 13, 1, 46, 83, 43, 84, 26, 23, 18, 21, 74, 115, 68, 64, 61, 51, 69, 48, 73, 105, 124, yeah, 28, so take the roll number. 47, 116, 85, 63, 99, 109, Rishita, roll number 92, 89, 162, 62, 1, 91, 70, 06, 3, 9, 107,
You can go.
Able to differentiate between the intensities of the stimulus.
Thank you. You are able to perceive.
Good morning. Thank you. क्या हुआ? सिर्फ एक ही आवाज आई, ऐसे क्यों? बाकी सबको दुख। थैंक यू बेटर। pelvic cavity. Okay, we had done the layers of the abdominal wall. Yes? Can any one of you stand up and tell me the layers of the abdominal wall? And we are talking of anterior abdominal wall. Okay, we are anterior and the posterior abdominal wall. Posterior side पे भी wall है, लेकिन अभी हम सिर्फ anterior abdominal wall की बात करेंगे. Okay, yes, stand up. Yes.
Superficial fascia has been here.
Yes.
Outer fatty layer known as capsule fascia, and inner fatty layer known as convergence.
Yes.
And then we have layer of muscles. Here. And then fat.
Layers of muscles के बाद we have the connective tissue.
Yes.
Okay, extra peritoneal connective tissue and then the peritoneum. Okay, so everyone of you know about these topics? You'll be able to enumerate. Okay, before I proceed with this, I would just want to show you this pelvic cavity. Okay, you can just okay, I just want to show you this pelvic cavity. This is the pelvic cavity, and we have talked that day about the pelvic inlet. This is the pelvic inlet. Beneath this pelvic inlet will be the pelvic organs line, and this inlet will be separating the pelvic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Yes, you know, starting from the pubic symphysis, pubic crest, pubic tubercle, pectineal line, and then the arcuate eminence and the area of the sacrum. Behind is the body of the sacral vertebra. This on one side and same on the other side. This is going to complete this pelvic inlet. Yes? Okay. Beneath this are these pelvic organs, and now this part. This is the pubic symphysis. This is the body of pubic symphysis. This part, like this, there is one membrane line, and that is called as the perineal membrane. So any structure which has to come out through the perineal cavity, perineal will be discussed with you. What I require, I am explaining only that part to you. Okay, so this part again has to be covered. So this part is covered by one membrane that is called as the perineal membrane. This perineal membrane is attached where it is attached on the pubic arch on both the sides. Yes, on the pubic arch on the both the sides and posterior border. Posterior border of this arch is free. Cavity is like this. Okay, and the posterior border of this membrane is free. In the center, yes you can. In the center there is one body that is called as perineal body. Rest of this area will be taken care. ये भी पूरा open है? Yes. लेकिन कोई भी चीज open तो नहीं है? In human body? Okay. Then again this has to be covered by some structure. We will talk later. That will be the pelvic diaphragm. But at present I require this. So this is the perineal membrane. This is the perineal membrane. Any structure which has to come out has to pierce through this perineal membrane. Yes, vaginal opening is going to come pierce this, first to come out, then the penile structure has to pierce this membrane and come out. Okay, when these organs are coming out, they carry some coverings of what? They are going to carry some coverings because we know testes are where the posterior abdominal wall. Okay, and when they are going to descend down through the abdominal cavity and come out and pierce the perineal membrane and come out, they are going to carry some covering along with this. Clear? बस अभी इतना समझ आ गया. तो ये pelvic inlet है, ये pelvic inlet है. Okay, and this is the pelvic cavity. It is pelvic viscera line, and anteriorly is the perineal membrane. Okay, and this perineal membrane का जो posterior border is free. In the center of the posterior border is the perineal body line. बाकी pelvic diaphragm and all perineum, superficial perineal pouches that should be taken care in the perineum. Now we start with this. You were told that first is the skin. Skin will be continuous above and below. Yes, beneath the skin is the superficial fascia. This superficial fascia is modified in two forms. That is the superficial fascia. If I do that, let me disturb this. Then this is the superficial fatty layer and deep membranous layer. Superficial fatty layer is again going to become continuous with these organs. This viscera which are going to come out. So superficial fascia or superficial fatty layer is going to become continuous with the scrotum. Superficial fascia of the scrotum in males, and is then again going to become continuous with the superficial fascia of the penis up to the colon. Okay. Then it becomes continuous with the superficial fascia. Clear? Okay. In females, it is going to become continuous with the round ligament of the uterus. Okay. Then this is the superficial fascia. Then deep membranous layer. This deep membranous layer again, it is going to line this. So any structure which is going to come from the posterior abdominal wall and come through this abdominal cavity and come to lie in this area will carry this deep membranous layer also. Okay, that deep membranous layer will be again present in the scrotum. This is the membranous layer. This blue thing is the membranous layer. This yellow is the fatty layer. Okay, then we can see here this fatty layer is continuous with the scrotum and the penis. Okay, clear? But in this scrotum, what happens? This fatty layer becomes replaced by some muscle that is called as the dartos muscle. So this superficial fatty layer becomes replaced by one muscle that is called as the dartos muscle. Okay, now coming to this membranous layer. This membranous layer is again coming onto the scrotum and becoming continuous with the deep fascia of the scrotum and deep fascia of the penis. And this deep fascia around the penis is called as the Poni's fascia. तुम लोग की क्लास मिस हो गई तो भी बताइए। Otherwise you would have been free in 10 to 11 times. Okay, now. Okay, this is the deep membranous layer, and this deep membranous layer, you know, is going to become continuous with the deep ratio of the scrotum and deep ratio of the pelvis to the penile fluid. Clear? Clear? Yes? So सो ही रहे ऐसे ही कर रहे हो. Okay. Now we know about this. Okay, now actually then I am not able to see this slide or you. I want to keep a track of all of you. Okay, now so we know about the superficial layer.
नहीं थोड़ा ऊपर रखो इसीलिए आवाज़ कट अब करो.
Okay, I'll try this ways. So now this will be supplied. Anterior abdominal wall will be having some nerve supply. Okay, cutaneous innervation, and will have some blood supply. We will talk of the nerve supply. A nerve supply in the midline will be supplied by anterior cutaneous branches from lower six thoracic nerves. Okay, and उसमें से जो lower 5 होंगी they will be intercostal nerves, branches from the intercostal nerves, और जो lower वाला होगा सबसे lower most fifth that will be subcostal. Okay, because T12 को हम specifically we call it as subcostal nerve, and बाकी are intercostal. This is also intercostal, but we call it as subcostal nerve क्योंकि lower margin से जा रही है of the 12th. Then any other nerve? Iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal nerve. Iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal nerve, they are going to supply this area, cutaneous innervation to this area. This is the iliohypogastric and this is the ilioinguinal. Ilioinguinal nerve is going to come in the perineum by passing through the inguinal canal. We will discuss. It is going to come out through the superficial inguinal ring in this area. कैसे बनेगी we will discuss. So this is the innervation, cutaneous innervation, that is by the anterior cutaneous branches from T7 to T12. जिसमें कि T6 intercostal है सारी की सारी upper 6 and this is the lower one is the subcostal nerve. Clear? And then there is iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal. दोनों की root value क्या है? L1 है. And dermatomal distribution also, 3 dermatomal distribution is important. That this T7 segment is supplying the epigastrium. Okay, T7 segment, dermatomal segment is supplying around the area around the epigastrium. Area around the umbilicus is supplied by T10 thoracic segment. Okay, and then the area around this line where the anterior where a line passing through the imaginary line is drawn passing through 2 anterior superior iliac spines. ठीक है ये वाला. So this will be supplied by what? This will be supplied by 12 and this will be supplied by L1. More specifically we talk of T10 and T7. T7 epigastrium क्योंकि epigastrium pain is most common, and then second is T10. Okay, that is around the umbilicus. Umbilicus is also again important because we talk of umbilical this caput medusae in case of portal hypertension. Oh, so, okay, so that's why this dermatomal distribution again becomes important, and we can see that these dermatomes when we have drawn them horizontally. Okay, horizontally. Okay, and we also say जो lines of cleavage होती है, lines of cleavage you all know, which are present, they are fine lines which are present on the skin.
can be appreciated when they are seen very minutely with the microscope. You can appreciate, or when you see very closely, you can appreciate these horizontal lines present in the abdomen. What is the significance of these line of cleavage? Yes. Okay, when the incision is given along this line, at the time of healing, scar is minimal. Okay, scar is minimal. Why? Because the collagen fibers are oriented in this direction only, in the abdomen. And when these fibers are oriented in this direction and we are just approximating them, then what happens? The scar is not produced too much. Scar ज़्यादा नहीं होगा, so there will be good approximation. ठीक है? So that's why we say if incision or to be given, it has to be given parallel to these lines. Clear? Then muscles of the anterior abdominal wall, you all know सबसे बाहर there is an external oblique muscle. Okay, सबसे outside is external, then internal, then transversus abdominis, then rectus abdominis, cremaster and pyramidalis. If I ask you to enumerate the muscles of anterior abdominal wall, you should be naming all these. तो तीन तो oblique हो गई, कौन सी external, दो oblique हो गई, external and the internal oblique, and then the transversus abdominis, then midline में बात की थी rectus abdominis. अभी हमने cremaster की बात नहीं की है, cremaster we'll talk of, and then another muscle in the center is the pyramidalis. छोटी सी muscle है, we'll talk of that again. Now coming on to the external oblique. External oblique, ये सारा, these are the fibers of the external oblique. So how it is originating? This external oblique is originating from these areas. That is the outer surface of lower 8 ribs. Okay, it is going to take origin from the outer surface of the lower 8 ribs. Clear? Again, it is going to originate from some part from the lumbar fascia. Okay, so जब ऐसे originate कर रहा है from the outer surface of upper 8 ribs, the fibers will be directed downwards and forwards. Okay, these fibers are directed downwards and forwards. So it is taking origin from the outer surface of lower 8 ribs. It is also originating from the lumbar fascia. Okay, and it is also taking origin from the iliac crest. ये iliac crest है. This is the iliac crest on either side. This iliac crest is divided into ventral segment, ventral 2/3 segment and dorsal 1/3 segment. जब तुम नीचे जाके iliac crest को appreciate करोगे, you will see कि ventral जो segment है, ventral 2/3 segment जिसकी हम बात करें, it is going to have an outer lip, it will have an inner lip and have an intermediate area. लेकिन जो posterior 1/3 segment की बात करेंगे, that is having outer sloping and the inner sloping, and which make crest-like structure is present. Okay, so on that basis we have said this is the ventral 2/3 and this is the dorsal 1/3. Okay, external oblique takes origin from the outer lip of whole of these ventral segment. पूरा का पूरा इस ventral segment से इस take origin. Clear? Yes. So this is the external oblique. This ventral segment is again divided. ये जो ventral 2/3 segment है बताया है, is again divided into anterior 2/3 and posterior 1/3. Okay, anterior 2/3 and posterior 1/3. So posterior 1/3 में से it is not going to originate. It is going to originate from anterior 2/3 of the ventral segment of iliac crest. ठीक है? Anterior 2/3 of the ventral segment of the iliac crest, if you want to specifically tell us. Why? Because posterior में there is something else present. और दोनों के बीच में there is an area that is called as lumbar triangle of Pettit. Okay, that is the lumbar triangle of Pettit. So outer lip of iliac crest, anterior 2/3 of ventral segment. Clear? सबसे बाहर वाली मसल है, तो सबसे बाहर से आएगी. बाहर is this outer lip of iliac crest. ठीक है? outer lip of iliac crest. वो जो outer lip of iliac crest है, उसके ventral segment के anterior 2/3 से, उसके ventral segment के anterior 2/3 से, this is going to origin. ठीक है? All these fibers, when they are going to originate from these ribs and this iliac crest, they are going to go in midline, downwards and forwards. In the midline, they are going to again originate some fibers from the xiphoid process, and then they are going to get inserted into linea alba. Linea alba क्या है? Is a midline where the fibers are going to interdigitate. Muscle fibers of the anterior abdominal wall are going to interdigitate. So it is going to get inserted into linea alba. It is again going to get inserted where? Onto the pubic symphysis. Okay, pubic symphysis. Okay, and then pubic symphysis, if you are going to go laterally, what is present? Pubic crest, pubic crest. Okay, so it will be attached to the pubic crest also. यहाँ पर I'll tell you pubic symphysis and pubic crest. Okay, so these muscle fibers, they are originating where? From all these areas, that is outer surface of lower 8 ribs, and it is going to originate यहाँ से from the iliac crest, outer lip of the iliac crest, at the level of linea semilunaris. Linea semilunaris क्या है? Is the line which is imaginary line which is going to separate the rectus abdominis from the other oblique muscles, other muscles of the abdomen, or you can say other lateral muscles of the abdomen. These muscle fibers become aponeurotic at the level of linea semilunaris. यही linea semilunaris है, ठीक है? At this point or along this line, these fleshy fibers, अभी तक तो fleshy fibers थे, these fleshy fibers are going to become tendinous, and they are going to form a flattened tendon. सोना नहीं है बच्चे. यस यू तुम्हारे आगे 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 ये होता है ना बच्चे, तुम्हारे आगे. एक्सटर्नल ऑब्लिक का क्या क्या डिस्कस किया हमने? कहाँ से ओरिजिन करती है? प्लीज प्लीज प्लीज. Is she correct? Origin कहाँ से होगा बच्चे? Actually origin is important. Outer border of ribs का outer border होता है outer surface. Then outer surface of यहाँ से origin है. सिर्फ यहीं से origin है तो ये तो बहुत discontinuous origin हो जाएगा. सिर्फ यहीं से origin है. You are saying बाकी ये कहाँ से आ रहा है? ये वाला सेगमेंट रह गया ना. Why I am telling you all these things? ये तो iliac crest वाला ये है बच्चे. iliac crest से origin ये हो रहा है. ये वाला पार्ट रहेगा. ये भी कहीं से आना है ना. कहाँ से ओरिजिनेट करेगा? इसीलिए आई एम सेइंग रिपीटेडली सेइंग लंबर फेशिया. सम फाइबर्स आर गोइंग टू ओरिजिनेट फ्रॉम द लंबर फेशिया. हर एक वर्ड का इंपॉर्टेंस है, वो तभी समझ आएगा जब सुनने की कोशिश की जाएगी. ठीक है बच्चे, सिट डाउन. So now this is the origin, and insertion कहाँ चला गया? These fibers are going to get inserted into the xiphoid process, linea alba, and then here linea alba के बाद it is going to get inserted यहाँ पर. That is the pubic symphysis. Pubic symphysis से laterally जब आएगा, that will be area of pubic tubercle. सिर्फ pubic tubercle तक I am talking about. So and I told you these fleshy fibers are going to become aponeurotic at the level of the linea, along the line of the linea semilunaris. They are going to become aponeurotic. इसीलिए देखो हमेशा when you are going to see the anterior abdominal wall, you are going to appreciate the fleshy fibers laterally and whitish structure in the center. Yes, why? Because they have to form some sheath here. That sheath has to cover this muscle, that is the rectus abdominis, and this rectus abdominis you can see is rarely visible. Why? Because it is being covered by the aponeurosis of these muscles. कैसे we'll discuss. So now we know that this external oblique is going to get inserted in this manner. Now अपर पता है, पोस्टीरियर एंड पता है, मिड लाइन में वी नो. नाउ एट द लोअर एंड वी हैव टॉक कि यहाँ तक एंटीरियर सुपीरियर आइलिक स्पाइन तक इट हैज टेक ओरिजिन फ्रॉम द आइलिक क्रेस्ट एंड इट हैज गॉट अटैच्ड टू द प्यूबिक ट्यूबरकल. एट द लोअर एंड व्हाट हैपन, दीज एपोन्यूरोटिक फाइबर्स, ये जो एपोन्यूरोटिक फाइबर्स थे यहाँ पर भी होंगे, फ्री होंगे. व्हाट हैपन्स, दीज लोअर एंड एट द लोअर एंड दीज एपोन्यूरोटिक फाइबर्स दे गेट फोल्डेड अपॉन इटसेल्फ. फोल्ड ऐसे नहीं होता है. फोल्ड इज नॉट ऑन द आउटसाइड, फोल्ड इज ऑन द इनसाइड. Okay, between the pubic tubercle and the anterior superior iliac spine, the lower aponeurotic fibers of the external oblique, or you can say the lower fibers of external oblique aponeurosis get folded upon itself. They are going to fold posteriorly, they are going to fold upon itself and to form a ligament that is called as the inguinal ligament. ठीक है, that is the inguinal ligament. Pubic tubercle के in this aponeurosis there is a gap now. इसी aponeurosis के अंदर there is a gap and that is called as the superficial inguinal ring. Okay, that is a gap that is called as superficial inguinal ring. ऊपर का origin समझ में आ गया सबको external oblique का? You know where it is fleshy and where are these aponeurotic fibers present? Okay. At the lower end, it is going to get attached to the anterior superior iliac spine here and the pubic tubercle and fold upon itself. ये देखो अंदर इसका folding end दिख रहा है? Yes, this is the inguinal ligament. Then there is one gap present in this aponeurosis and that gap is called as the superficial inguinal ring. ठीक है. Superficial inguinal ring. So superficial inguinal ring is present above and medial to the pubic tubercle. ये pubic tubercle है, it is going to be present above and medial to the pubic tubercle. Okay. So pubic tubercle you can locate, उसके above and medially there will be a gap that is called as the superficial inguinal ring. Clear? When I have shown you this diagram, you can appreciate this femoral artery and femoral vein coming down. Okay, beneath this gap, they are passing beneath this inguinal ligament. तभी जब you had seen in the lower limb, these femoral artery and femoral vein, we said always that they are going to come beneath the inguinal ligament. Beneath the inguinal ligament, over which fascia? Over fascia iliaca, very good. And anteriorly bounded by fascia transversalis. उस fascia transversalis को हम यहाँ पे trace करेंगे. Okay. Then wait. We are going to trace that fascia transversalis. Okay. Now this gap in the external oblique aponeurosis we know. Okay, this is the gap. Why this gap is required? For us to pass, so that some structures can pass into perineum through the abdominal cavity. Which two structures? That is the spermatic cord in males and the round ligament of uterus in females. Okay, spermatic cord or round ligament of uterus in females. Clear? These structures, because they are developing कहाँ? Posterior abdominal wall में. Posterior abdominal wall में these structures are developing and now they are going to descend down. When they are descending down, they carry something else also along with them. We are going to discuss that. Processus vaginalis. अभी के लिए हम बोलेंगे spermatic cord and round ligament of uterus, they have to come out. They are going to come out through superficial inguinal ring. कहाँ पे located है superficial inguinal ring? Above and medial to the pubic tubercle. Very good. इसके साथ we have talked of this ilioinguinal nerve. Ilioinguinal nerve again कहाँ से आ रही है? Posterior abdominal wall से आ रही है, जहाँ पे lumbar plexus is present. Yes. And from that lumbar plexus, L1 segment से one nerve is coming, and that is the ilioinguinal nerve. That is going to traverse पूरा inguinal canal. We'll discuss inguinal canal, but that is going to come out through the superficial inguinal ring. Okay. So if I ask you superficial inguinal ring से which all two structures pass, you have to tell us first. Then this abhi I will not talk. Okay, when these are these two cruras, अब ये जो crura है, there will be one medial crura. If this is superficial inguinal ring, there will be one crura, that is the medial crura, and that is the lateral crura. ये जो crura है कैसे बनेगा? Where this medial crura is present and where this lateral crura is present. If I ask you, tell me boundary of this superficial inguinal ring. You will say it is bounded on the lateral side by lateral crura of external oblique aponeurosis. Yes, medial by medial crura of external aponeurosis. Superficially or towards the roof, it is rounded, where these two fibers are uniting. Base कहाँ है? Base कहाँ है? हाँ, base कहाँ है? Base is over the pubic crest. Base is over the pubic crest. Why? Because these fibers are going to come like this. Okay, and I told you they are going to get attached here. यहाँ पर attachment होगा, ठीक है? And the inguinal ligament is here. You can console. Okay, inguinal ligament is this, and I told you pubic symphysis पे these fibers, external oblique aponeurosis is going to get attached. Okay, then this is going to stretch. This is going to stretch from this area to this area, so as to get attached to the pubic tubercle. These aponeurotic fibers are going to stretch from this area and then get attached to this pubic tubercle. उस pubic tubercle के बाद सब कुछ continuous है. तो ये जो gap है, this gap is the superficial inguinal ring. So if I ask you ये base क्या है superficial inguinal ring का? Is this pubic crest? Okay, so we say superficial inguinal ring is bounded by medial and the lateral crura of external oblique aponeurosis. Base is resting on the pubic crest. इसके medially क्या होगा? Pubic symphysis. इसके laterally क्या होगा? Pubic tubercle. Okay, clear? जैसे pubic crest बोलोगे clear हो जाएगा. Clear that side also? Yes. Yes. Because this is required. When we are going to talk about the inguinal canal, this is important. This will again become important segment. External oblique aponeurosis clear, superficial fascia is being removed here. We'll talk again to this. I've shown you pubic tubercle there. Okay, so I need not to show it here. Again, this is the superficial inguinal ring, a schematic diagram to show you this. अब यहाँ पर ये डायग्राम दिखाने का क्या मतलब है? To explain you this ligament that is called as the lacunar ligament. Lacunar ligament again is a modification of what? Of inguinal ligament. Again, it is a modification of inguinal ligament. So this was this. Yes, inguinal ligament. Then we said this is the superficial inguinal ring. Yes. Now, यहाँ पर जो external oblique aponeurosis के fibers are attached on this, that is the pubic tubercle. They are going to stretch. They are going to get stretched and get attached to the superior ramus of the pubic arch or this pectineal line. यहाँ है tubercle, ये tubercle है. Yes, you can appreciate. This is the tubercle. यहाँ पे aponeurotic fibers of external oblique are attached. They are going to get stretched posteriorly so as to get attached onto the superior ramus of the pubic arch. ये pubic arch है, इसका ये superior ramus है जिसको हम pectineal line भी बोलते हैं. Pectineal line पर आ रहे हैं. So when these fibers are going to stretch like this, okay, they are going to form a C-shaped lacunar ligament. They are going to form. It is going to go like this and get attached onto the pectineal line. So they are going to form this, and this is called as the lacunar ligament. Okay, ये lacunar ligament जब ये stretching हुआ है, it is going posteriorly. It will have a lateral free margin. Yes, so this is the free margin. This is the lateral free margin of the lacunar ligament. Clear? Lacunar ligament clear हो गया. यहाँ पे lacunar ligament है. You understand? This is the superficial inguinal ring. There is one more ligament. That is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament. This is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament. यही inguinal ligament से. This is again the inguinal ligament. Some fibers get extended from this pubic tubercle again and get inserted onto the linea alba in midline. Some fibers get extended from this area and get inserted onto the linea alba in the midline. Get inserted onto the linea alba in the midline. So this is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament. Why so many ligaments are present? So as to strengthen this ring. Because any potential gap is capable of producing hernia whenever we strangulate, and we strangulate n number of times by coughing, sneezing, defecation. Every time we are strangulating, okay, while doing exercises also. So these areas, they become potential sites for herniation. But this is required, so that because these structures have to pass through it. So what has happened? There is a gap, but there are other additional modifications around, so as to support this gap, so that this does not become so common. The herniation through these sites does not become so common. Clear? Yes? So if I ask you the modifications of the inguinal ligament, one. Second. Very good. Then pectineal ligament I have not told you. Pectineal ligament क्या है? Pectineal ligament वही. Small again extension इसका posterior extension of the pectineal line. Basically what happened? ये जो external oblique aponeurosis है यहाँ पे modify हुआ lacunar ligament के तरह, इसका थोड़ा सा extension go posteriorly and blends with the periosteum of the pectineal line. जो pectineal line का periosteum है ना, उसी के साथ blend हो जाता है, तो थोड़ी सी thickening हो जाती है. उस thickening को we call it as pectineal ligament. ठीक है? तो now you know what is pectineal ligament. Now you know reflected part of the inguinal ligament. Now you know the lacunar ligament. There are three modifications of the inguinal ligament. Yes? Very good. Then, the direction of fibers of external oblique muscle? Like you are putting your hands in your pockets. That is the downwards and forwards. Downwards and forwards. जब ये direction याद रखोगे तो you will be able to locate the origin also. Origin कहाँ से आ रहा है? It is going to come from the ribs. It is going to come from the back. It is going to come from the iliac crest and get inserted into the midline. मिडलाइन में जो भी सारी चीजें लीनिया अल्बा ज़ीफॉइड प्रोसेस प्यूबिक सिम्फाइसिस, उसके बाद यदि लोअर एंड पे थोड़ी थोड़ी मॉडिफिकेशंस है. ठीक है? एंड देयर इज अ गैप, सुपरफिशियल इंगुइनल रिंग. क्लियर? अब इसके एग्जैक्टली ऑपोजिट है द फाइबर्स ऑफ इंटरनल ऑब्लिक. तो डायरेक्शन ऑफ इंटरनल ऑब्लिक के फाइबर्स क्या होंगे? दैट बी बैकवर्ड एंड अपवर्ड. बैकवर्ड्स एंड अपवर्ड. So they are going to be directed like this. So this is the internal oblique. अब internal oblique का origin कहाँ से होगा? अब backwards and upwards. ठीक है? तो lower side से it is going to take origin. कहाँ से? Obviously from the lumbar fascia. Back से आना है lumbar fascia. It is going to take origin from the lower three ribs and their costal cartilages. Lower three. ठीक है? lower 3 ribs and their costal cartilages. It is going to take origin from, and it is again going to take origin from what? Iliac crest. Iliac crest में कहाँ से? Intermediate segment. ठीक है, intermediate segment. Actually different book says different things. Some book says कि पूरा जो ventral segment है ना, उसका whole of the intermediate area से internal oblique originates. Some book says उसका anterior 2/3 से. But I think we should follow that it is going to take origin from the whole of the ventral segment का intermediate area. Yes? Intermediate area, पूरा ventral segment. Ventral segment, you when I say ventral segment of iliac crest, you understand? Yes. Okay. And then it is going to take origin. यहाँ पे भी कुछ origin हो रहा है. ये क्या है? ये वाला. Inguinal ligament. Okay, inguinal ligament. This is going to take origin from the lateral 2/3 of the inguinal ligament. ऐसे fold हुआ था, उस fold के lateral 2/3 से it is going to take origin. Okay, अब okay, I'll go to that later. And it is going to get inserted again into the midline. So again, these fibers are going to be directed upwards and backwards, and to insert onto the xiphoid process, linea alba, and the pubic symphysis. Okay, and again we know at the level of the linea semilunaris, these fibers are going to become aponeurotic. Fleshy fibers सिर्फ lateral side में रहेंगे. Clear? Yes? Yes? Can anyone of you repeat the internal oblique origin? Fast, anyone?
Ventral 2/3 of the intermediate segment of the iliac crest.
Ventral 2/3 of the intermediate segment of iliac crest. यही चलो ठीक है, ओके, आई स्टेप देन वैसे होल ऑफ द इंटरमीडिएट सेगमेंट, ठीक है, होल ऑफ द इंटरमीडिएट एरिया ऑफ द वेंट्रल सेगमेंट. चलो ठीक है, और वेरी गुड.
अब हम inguinal ligament के
यस, inguinal ligament के which part? lateral 2/3 of the inguinal. यस, देन इसको देखिए होता है इसलिए कि ये fleshy fibers है, ये origin है. These fibers are going to originate like this and get inserted onto the midline. Very good. Okay. Ribs and their costal cartilages, and then it is going to get inserted there. ठीक है, चलो. अब उसके बाद we are going to come to the my mistake में transfer. I had to show you this thing. ये fibers ऊपर है ना, direction different है ना. I had to, इसमें horizontal है, ठीक है, इसमें horizontal है. ये transversus abdominis है. This is transversus abdominis. Transversus abdominis का origin, and generally these nerves what happen? We have talked of the cutaneous innervation. These nerves will be formed where? From the number plexus. They have to pierce these. Yes. Okay. So what they do? They pierce the aponeurosis of these muscles and then come on to the anterior side for us to supply the anterior abdominal wall. These nerves generally lie between two layers, that is the internal oblique and transversus abdominis का aponeurosis. बहुत difficult होता है इनका aponeurosis separate करना. When you are going to go to dissection, तो मैं लगेगा कि मैं तीनों aponeurosis को separate करके ऐसे ही you will not be able to. They are appreciated as a combined. Okay. But in living individuals, you can see that they are lying between internal oblique and transversus abdominis. Okay. Okay. अब transversus abdominis का origin कब है? ये तो you can make out. Yes, you. Transversus abdominis का origin. बताओ, दिख रहा है? If you tell me, then only I will be able to correct you, or you will remember this. Otherwise, मैं बोल के चले जाऊँगी. Yes. देखो, ये fleshy fibers हो गया. I will tell you. तो ये क्या है? It is going to originate from what? Lumbar fascia. Okay, it is going to originate from lumbar fascia. ये सारे muscle fibers are going to originate from costal cartilages. कितने? Lower 6 costal cartilages. Okay, तो originate from the lower 6 costal. ज़्यादा है ना? उसमें तो बस यहीं तक आ रहा था, यहीं से originate कर रहा था. Okay, so lower 6 costal cartilages. Then iliac crest. Yes, अंदर है तो कहाँ से होगा? Inner lip. तीन ही तो areas है iliac crest के ऊपर. So it is going to take origin from the inner lip. Inner lip, anterior 2/3. ठीक है? Anterior 2/3 of the ventral segment of the inner lip of the iliac crest. उसके बाद कितना लगा है? Lateral 1/3. ये lateral 2/3 था,
the first process linea alba pubic symphysis. Okay. Yes. Deep to this. Sit down. Conjoint tendon. Deep to this क्या होगा? Internal, external oblique, internal oblique, transversus abdominis. Then there is fascia transversalis. Okay, and fascia transversalis is also having one gap that is called as deep inguinal ring. ठीक है, fascia transversalis के भी अंदर एक गैप है that is called as deep inguinal ring. और वो जो deep inguinal ring है where it will be present? It will be present exactly above the mid inguinal point. Okay, mid inguinal point. Mid inguinal point कैसे बनेगा? Pubic symphysis and ASIS का mid point. Okay, so 3 to 4 centimeters above that mid inguinal point, there is a defect in the fascia transversalis. That is the deep inguinal ring. ठीक है, okay. Again, we are going to talk of this conjoint tendon. Conjoint tendon is formed by the union of internal oblique and transversus abdominis के fibers. Internal oblique and transversus abdominis के fibers, they are going to unite and they are going to form the conjoint tendon. This is internal oblique. I told कि external oblique में तो यहाँ पर इस लेवल पे डिफेक्ट था, यहाँ पर superficial inguinal ring इसी लेवल पे था. Yes, if this is a tubercle, this is symphysis, यहाँ पर गैप होना चाहिए. Yes, superficial inguinal ring. Okay. उसके ऊपर when these fibers are going to come, and we said कि these fibers of internal oblique are going to originate from the lateral 2/3 of the inguinal ligament. ये वाला एरिया क्या है? यहाँ पर तो कुछ भी नहीं है. Because the internal oblique के जो fibers हैं, they are going to arch. They are going to arch over this gap in the superficial inguinal ring. क्योंकि superficial inguinal ring को posteriorly they cannot cross ना. There has to be some space that has to be connected to the gap in the fascia transversalis. एक canal जैसा बनेगा. ठीक है, तो ये जो internal oblique के fibers ने यहाँ से originate किया, that is the lateral 2/3 of the inguinal ligament, and उसके बाद they had not taken any origin. Why? Because these lower fibers, lower eponeurotic fibers of internal oblique, they are going to arch over the superficial inguinal ring and get inserted into the pubic symphysis. Arch करके pubic symphysis पे insert हो जाते हैं. ठीक है, ऐसे ही transverse abdominis. Transversus abdominis का what happen? Lateral 1/3 से originate करेंगे and then they are going to arch. They form the arching fibers. हम ये arching इसका, अच्छा ये arching यहाँ पर तो थोड़ा और laterally है, यहाँ पे थोड़ा medially है. ऐसा क्यों? ऐसा क्यों? Because this is an oblique canal. ये canal oblique है, ऐसे आ रहा है. ठीक है. So when this canal is coming from the lateral side to the medial side, that is from the deep inguinal ring which is located slightly laterally to the superficial inguinal ring which is present medially, so we can say ये वाले fibers थोड़ा सा और medial आ सकते हैं, fleshy fibers, as compared to the deeper ones, because they have to create a space. Yes? Yes, कितना yes? सिर्फ एक ही yes है या और भी है? इसको समझ नहीं आया. External oblique aponeurosis. Let me see. I have another diagram in this. External oblique aponeurosis folded upon itself to form the inguinal ligament. Yes. उसके बाद these fibers got stretched in this area so as to form the superficial inguinal ring. This is the superficial inguinal ring. ठीक है. Okay. Now ये superficial inguinal ring है. उसके बाद internal oblique fibers are going to originate. अभी मैं cremasteric की तो बात ही नहीं कर रही. I'll talk of cremasteric muscle in the inguinal ligament, inguinal canal. अब internal oblique आ गया. Internal oblique से they are going to originate from lateral 2/3. ठीक है. Originate करके अब ये वाले fibers का जो lower end है, यहाँ पे भी तो fibers होंगे. Internal oblique का aponeurosis होगा, but that is free ना. You make inguinal ligament like this. So this is the inguinal ligament. These fibers got stretched and they are forming superficial inguinal ring like this. Okay. Then curve ऐसे होगा because we said इन लोगों को ये बताया कि curve inside होगा, बाहर की तरफ curve नहीं होगा. Okay. Now what is happening? This is the internal oblique. This is internal oblique taking origin from this area. And now this internal oblique, this hand has to go to the pubic symphysis for insertion. So it is going to go like this, and then arch, and then get inserted onto the pubic symphysis.
तो ये स्पेस रह गया, यस। उसके बाद ट्रांसवर्स एब्डोमिनस, ट्रांसवर्स एब्डोमिनस इतना अगर 2/3 से ओरिजिनेट करता तो हम लोगों को ये obliquity of the canal we would have not been able to maintain. So थोड़ा सा all lateral origin हुआ. Now what has happened? This free end has to again go to pubic symphysis and get inserted. So what will happen? This is going to go like this and get over the canal and get inserted onto the pubic symphysis. तो ये जो canal है, इसका roof is being formed by internal oblique and the transversus abdominis. But ये canal जैसा तुम्हें downstairs appreciate नहीं होगा, because these all are lying very close to each other, because there cannot be so much space there. Okay, but this is जो orientation है, this is in this way only. Internal oblique, transversus abdominis forming the roof. Okay, and external oblique में there is a defect. Clear? अब what we said internal oblique का eponymous got inserted है, transversus abdominis का eponymous got inserted है. So when it is going and getting inserted over the pubic tubercle, what is happening? Internal oblique and transversus abdominis के aponeurotic fibers they are going to unite with each other and become thick. Become thick. कौन से एरिया में become thick? इस एरिया में become thick. इस एरिया. Why? Just behind the gap. Just behind the superficial inguinal ring. Because this is a potential space for hernia. This has to be protected from posterior side. So what is happening in dono kyphoneurosis is becoming thicker in this area and get attached here. And this is called as the conjoint case. In this way, the superficial inguinal ring is indirectly handling a protection from the posterior side without hampering the structures which are traversing through this inguinal canal and going to come up like this. Okay? Clear? हम लोगों को दिखा? नहीं दिखा, वेरी गुड. और बताओगे भी नहीं जब तक पूछा नहीं जाएगा, है ना? तो ये मेरे काम. This is important. If you understand, you will never forget it. This is enfolding. Aponeurosis came like this. Aponeurosis came like this and got folded on itself. ठीक है? तो ऐसे अटैच हो गया. उसके बाद we said these aponeurotic fibers of external oblique got stretched and there was a gap and got inserted onto pubic symphysis. तो यहाँ पे gap बन गया. That was superficial inguinal ring. तो यहाँ पे हमारी superficial inguinal ring is बन गया. अब next to it is internal oblique. Internal oblique fibers, fleshy fibers, to origin from lateral to third. This end is free now. Yes, this end is free. These fibers, these are aponeurotic fibers now. Okay, these aponeurotic fibers are going to stretch and get inserted onto pubic symphysis. Yes. So when they are going like this, they are arching over something, some structure. So they are arching over the inguinal canal. Yeah. फिर इनकी arching की वजह से there is a space created, that is the inguinal canal. Then next to it is the transversus abdominis. Again, these fibers are going to originate from this place, and then this is free end. These aponeurotic fibers are going to stretch and get inserted where? On the pubic symphysis. Again, they are forming the roof of this inguinal canal. So we say roof of inguinal canal will be formed by internal oblique and transversus abdominis. If I ask you exactly, medial roof is formed and lateral roof is formed by which structure? You will tell me medial roof will be formed by internal oblique and lateral part of the roof will be formed by the transversus abdominis. Clear हो गया? इसको रट्टा मारने की जरूरत ही नहीं. अब now what has happened over this area, that is over the pubic crest, the aponeurotic fibers of internal oblique and transversus abdominis they become thick. क्यों? Because यहाँ पे superficial inguinal ring है. So posteriorly these two fibers, internal oblique and transversus abdominis, they become thick and support this ring from behind. And that is called as the conjoint tendon or pars inguinalis. समझ आया conjoint tendon का concept? ठीक है? तो conjoint tendon is there, which is going to protect the superficial inguinal ring from behind. I had broken this snow, no? Okay. So now you understand the conjoint tendon
And we have n number of ligaments around this area which are protecting. That is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament, pectineal ligament, okay, lacunar ligament, just to protect this area. Clear? Rectus abdominis. Then we'll come to rectus abdominis. Fascia transversalis का gap. Okay. एक चीज और fascia transversalis में there will be gap in this area deep to transversus abdominis. We have talked about the transversus abdominis. Deep to transversus abdominis, fascia transversalis में एक gap, that is the deep inguinal ring. That deep inguinal, superficial inguinal ring को protect करने के लिए conjoint tendon है, बहुत सारे ligaments. Superficial, deep ring को protect करने के लिए क्या है हमारे पास? बताओ क्या है? Mid inguinal point पर there will be this defect in the fascia transversalis. At internal oblique aponeurotic fibers, they are going to get origin from the lateral two-thirds. So will they be protected? Will this ring will be protected anteriorly by the fleshy fibers of internal oblique? Yes or no? And some part in the lateral side by the transversus abdominis. So this ring is protected anteriorly by what? Internal oblique and transversus abdominis. That is why what is happening, these internal oblique and transversus abdominis fibers, they are taking origin from the reflected part of the inguinal ligament or reflected part of the external oblique aponeuros. Okay? Why? Because then this space again is protected. So any space, if it is being created, physiologically present, it has to be protected. So it is being protected in this case by these two muscles which are present anteriorly. Okay, coming on to the rectus abdominis. Rectus abdominis has two heads, and we have already discussed that this muscle is present in segments. This muscle is present in certain segments, and these, in between these fleshy fibers, there are these tendinous intersections present. That's why those who are doing exercises, making their abs, what they are doing, they are working on these muscle fibers. So these muscle fibers bulge out, and these tendinous intersections, obviously they are not going to bulge out. So they remain at place. And one can easily make out these as abs. Okay. So, okay. Now, origin कहाँ से होगा? Origin, this is a midline muscle which will be present in between this linea semilunaris and this linea alba. Linea semilunaris का origin insertion कहाँ से होगा? If I ask you to do the surface marking, yes, yes. Linea semilunaris का origin and insertion होती कहाँ है? Please, no talking, nothing. Yes, lateral muscles, lateral anterior abdominal wall muscle and medial abdominal wall muscle के बीच में there is a space visible, okay, superficially visible, that is called as linea semilunaris. But in obese, we will not be able to make out. Then we should have some certain landmarks, surface landmarks. So can you tell me those surface landmarks? It's a difficult thing. Transverse fascia नहीं बचे. Laterally क्या है? Tip of 9 costal cartilage. देखो ना, ये लाइन को यहीं से ट्रेस करना है बच्चे. इसीलिए स्केलेटन को अच्छे से मेमोराइज करें. ठीक है? तो it is going to be traced from the tip of the 9 costal cartilage to this. What is this? ये क्या है? Pubic tubercle. Okay. This is the linea semilunaris. Okay. Origin is going to be from this place. क्या होगा यहाँ पे? Pubic tubercle के midline में, pubic tubercle के medially, pubic symphysis, body of pubic symphysis. So it is going to take origin from the anterior surface of the body of pubic symphysis. One head, that is the superficial head. Deep head is going to take origin from the pubic crest. Pubic symphysis का anterior surface, body of pubic symphysis का anterior surface. One head, second head from the pubic crest. These two heads are going to go above and get inserted onto what? Costal cartilages and the xiphoid process. Okay, it is going to get inserted onto the lower 6 costal cartilages and their ribs and the xiphoid process. So ये linea, ये हो गया rectus abdominis, yes. And this is again important. That rectus abdominis due to tendinous intersections है, they are generally seen at the level of xiphoid process. ठीक है? At the level of umbilical and halfway between the xiphoid process and the umbilical. प्री टेंजिनस इंटरसेक्शन इन्हीं पर होते हैं. अगर कहीं abnormally दिख रहा है तो that is some abnormality. Okay, थोड़ा ऊपर नीचे होगा, obviously not exactly at the level of umbilicus, but हाँ around. Okay. Now, rectus abdominis clear हो गया? Yes. But when we see anterior abdominal wall in the picture, we are not able to see that muscle. We are only able to see few fleshy fibers coming from the lateral side. That is the external oblique. Okay, why this is not seen? Because this muscle is being covered by rectus sheath. That rectus sheath is being formed by external oblique, internal oblique, transversus abdominis का aponeurosis. But okay, उसके पीछे will be the fascia transversalis. So fascia transversalis, you know that it is going to lie in the. कोई भी इसको पढ़ दो खड़े होकर. Any one of you stand up. Any one of you, if I give you answer sheets and ask question papers for the profs and ask any one of you stand up and pick up, all of you will stand ना. तो इसके लिए भी please कर ही लो voluntary stand up. Why should I always have to call the roll numbers? आ जाओ कोई भी. इसको ये तो शुरुआत तो डन ना. No, okay. I can make out few faces. मतलब मैं बहुत कम तुम लोगों की classes लेती हूँ, but I can make out the faces who want to study. तो अगर मतलब कुछ extra class लेंगे, I can pick out those people, those students. कि हाँ, you all can come. The class will become interesting. If you all will be absent, class will not be interesting. तो बच्चे, everyone has to show the interest. चलो बच्चे.
Fascia transversalis lines the inner surface of transversus muscle and forms endo-abdominal fascia, continuous with other fascia, attached to inner lip of iliac crest, post margin of inguinal ligament, pecten pubis, pubic crest, behind conjoint tendon. Presents an oval gap 1.25 cm above mid inguinal point, deep inguinal ring.
नहीं समझ आया.
Last
Deep inguinal ring.
that in which context mid inguinal point.
Okay, actually they are talking of fascia transversalis ना. Fascia transversalis कहाँ से आया? तो they are saying कि जो transversus muscle है उसके ऊपर का fascia, that is fascia transversalis, and that fascia transversalis is going to present a gap over the deep inguinal ring, 1.25 to 2 centimeters above. Some book says 3 centimeters also, 2 to 4 centimeters also. क्या दिया हुआ है? निशांत में 2 to 4 centimeters दिया हुआ है. ग्रेज में 3 centimeters दिया हुआ है. ठीक है, 1.25 2 inches and they have given approximately 3 centimeters. ठीक है, so we'll follow that. Okay, so this is going to, अब सबसे inner है. Okay, so where it is going to get attached? Obviously onto the innermost lip of the iliac crest. Yes, along with what muscle? Transversus abdominis. Then it is going to get attached to the posterior margin of the inguinal ligament, and then pecten pubis, everyone knows. Pecten pubis, pubic crest, and behind the conjoint ligament. Obviously, when we say pubic crest, pecten pubis, pubic crest, it becomes the area of the conjoint tendon only. Clear? So this is the fascia transversalis. Now we'll talk of the rectus sheath. Rectus sheath हमने बात कर ली है. We are going to say that this is present. It is divided. This is different at different levels. Okay, above the costal margin. Rectus sheath above the costal margin, it is different. यहाँ पर भी rectus muscle है. Yes, between the costal margin and the line passing through the anterior superior iliac spines. Okay, line at the level of anterior superior iliac spines. यहाँ पर rectus sheath is different. Formation of rectus sheath is different. Below this, formation of rectus sheath is different. Okay. Okay. Above this. Above the costal margins. Okay, above the costal margin, if I say costal margin is lowest point of the thoracic case, उसके ऊपर anterior wall of the rectus sheath is formed by the external oblique aponeurosis. Okay, it is formed by the external oblique का aponeurosis. This is the external oblique. ये external oblique का aponeurosis forming the anterior sheath. This is internal oblique. This is transversus abdominis. This is transversalis fascia, and this is parietal peritoneum. They are all lying posterior. Yes, above the costal margin. Okay, and there beneath this, okay, we'll leave this, and then in between the costal margin and the line joining the two anterior superior iliac spines, what happened? Internal oblique aponeurosis splits into two. Okay, it is going to यहाँ पर और थोड़ा सा confusion है. Wait, let me go to this. First this. Okay. Now external. This is superficial fascia. Skin, superficial fascia. Then pectoralis major. We are not concerned with this. We should be knowing that this is the rectus muscle. Okay, this is the rectus muscle. This brown color, and the aponeurosis of the external oblique is forming the anterior wall. So anteriorly rectus sheath is formed by the aponeurosis of external oblique. इसके immediate posterior is present what? Is these costal cartilages. ठीक है? जो they were saying ना, वो उसके नीचे आएगा. Fascia transversalis and everything. Why? Because this muscle is going to get attached to the ribs. Okay, so now aponeurosis is present superficially and it is resting on what? It is resting on the 5th, 6th and 7th costal cartilages. Posteriorly. Costal margin के ऊपर की बात करें. ठीक है, costal margin के ऊपर तो posteriorly rectus sheath में क्या क्या होगा? Costal cartilages होंगे, जो भी concerned ribs हैं. Concerned ribs क्या है? 5th, 6th, 7th. और anterior wall किससे बनेगी? External oblique aponeurosis. In the area between, okay, that is the costal margin and the line joining the anterior superior iliac spine, internal oblique aponeurosis is going to split into two. So anterior wall will be formed by the external oblique aponeurosis and the anterior layer of the internal oblique aponeurosis. I am hindering your view, yes? अच्छा, ये थोड़ा सा कम देखने पड़ेगा. Okay. Now, posterior lamina of the internal oblique aponeurosis is going to go posteriorly. And the transverse abdominis का aponeurosis is going to be like posteriorly. अब यहाँ पर we will not say about the costal cartilages. We'll directly go into what? We'll directly go into the fascia transversalis. ठीक है, वहाँ पर क्या था? वहाँ पर we have talked about the muscle, that is the rectus muscle, क्योंकि rectus muscle ही directly 5th, 6th, 7th costal cartilages के ऊपर जा रही थी insert होने के लिए, pubic symphysis से origin किया and then had gone to the costal cartilage. बस वहां पर क्या था? जो एक्सटर्नल ऑब्लिक का एपोन्यूरोसिस है, दैट हैज गॉन एंटीरियरली टू फॉर्म दैट रेक्टस शीथ. उसके एंड इसकी से बीनीथ दैट विल बी द कॉस्टल कार्टिलेजेस एंड उसके बीनीथ इफ वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक ऑफ आफ्टर द इंटरकॉस्टल मसल्स वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक ऑफ द इंटरनल ऑब्लिक एंड ट्रांसवर्सिस एब्डोमिनिस. बट दैट इंटरनल ऑब्लिक एंड ट्रांसवर्सिस एब्डोमिनिस का जो एपोन्यूरोसिस है इस लेवल तक पहुंचता ही नहीं है, वहां तक पहुंचता ही नहीं है. इसीलिए व्हाट दे से दे डू नॉट लेबल इट. ठीक है, तुम्हें लगेगा यहाँ तो लेबल किया ही नहीं है, तो इसीलिए दे हैड नॉट लेबल्ड इट. आई थॉट इसमें एक्सप्लेनेशन करना इजी रहेगा. इसमें क्या है? वी हैव द एपोन्यूरोसिस ऑफ इंटरनल ऑब्लिक एंड द ट्रांसवर्सिस एब्डोमिनिस एंड वी से रेक्टस शीथ इज एंटीरियरली formed by the external oblique aponeurosis and anterior lamina of the internal oblique aponeurosis anteriorly, and posteriorly it is formed by the posterior lamina of the internal oblique aponeurosis and the aponeurosis of transversus abdominis. उसके बाद वो सारी लेयर्स जो हमने एब्डोमेन की याद की हैं, फेशिया ट्रांसवर्सालिस है, एक्स्ट्रा पेरिटोनियल टिश्यू है एंड देन द पैराइटल पेरिटोनियम. ओके, then below the line joining these two anterior superior iliac spines, what happened? The aponeurosis of all these three muscles form the anterior boundary of the or anterior wall of the rectus sheath. जब ये तीनों की तीनों मसल्स का एपोन्यूरोसिस कमिंग एंटीरियरली, so there will be no muscle, will be सीधा fascia. Okay, when you are going to cut, Sonia, when you are going to cut the anterior abdominal wall downstairs, show them this arcuate line. बहुत अच्छे से दिखता है कि सारी muscles have gone anterior to the rectus sheath. So when you are going to remove the anterior abdominal wall, you can appreciate this defect or this gap. Okay, this gap, and you can directly see यहाँ पे एक fascia पड़ा हुआ है और सारी muscles have gone anteriorly. This can be appreciated. अब सारी चीजें आगे जा रही हैं, पीछे की तरफ एक gap होगा and that will be demarcated by a line, and that line is called as arcuate line. ये muscles ऐसे सारी की सारी तीन muscles हैं, they are like this. Now what has happened? They have all gone anteriorly. तो क्या होगा? यहाँ के बाद you can appreciate some gap posteriorly. Yes, on the fascia, that gap will be visible. बहुत अच्छे से दिखेगा. That is called as the arcuate line. Clear? So now the rectus sheath formation is different in different areas of the abdominal wall, and you should be able to tell us this thing. ठीक है? Correlate कर लोगे? Why costal cartilages are different above the costal margin in the rectus sheath? And why not below it? Yes? Yes? Oh. Thank you.
Roll number 1, 2, 3, 3.